So hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on living through a renovation. Thank you so much for your time and taking that time to join us today. I'm Michelle, and I'm the executive assistant at TQ Construction, and I will be assisting Megan during this webinar today. A few things to mention before we start. A recorded version of this webinar will be available in the next 2 days or so look out for that email. To respect our presenter and any other attendees, we ask you to stay muted during this webinar. We will have a Q&A at the end of the session, so feel free to ask questions along the way at the chat box below, or you can ask them at the end, and Megan will answer your questions at that point. Now I'm happy to introduce you to TQ's Project Relations, Megan.
So today we're just talking about kind of it's really like food for thought sort of things with regards to living through a renovation. It's one of those things where it's a topic of conversation with almost any renovation that we talk about completing, whether it's possible to live through one and what the parameters might look like. There are definitely things outside of this presentation that might be valid, and if there are specific examples where you might want to ask, feel free. We have the chat that if you are worried about forgetting your question, please feel free to type it in there and we'll get to it. Or you can wait till the end. So we'll dive right into it. Why people stay in their homes. So there's a number of reasons why people might stay in their homes. Anything from, finding a place to stay can be difficult or expensive, especially if you're looking at a renovation that isn't for like a full year, right? A lot of leases have a minimum of a 1-year lease, and a lot of people can't afford to just commit to being in another rental that is equivalent to their existing living space for a full year, especially if their home's only going to be out of commission for, 3 months or 5 months or even 6 months. It's really hard to make that justification, especially when everything is just so expensive, or whether it's the family's routine in general of like, you don't want to move too far away from school and work and all of your activities. So things like that, as well as if a project's not affecting like a major part of the home. Like if you have 3 bathrooms and you're doing 1 bathroom, it's pretty easy to live around renovating 1 bathroom and not really make that much of a disruption to your home. Everyone has a different tolerance level of what they feel is a reasonable amount of disruption in their home. I've worked with clients who they're like, if you're doing my kitchen, I cannot be here. I need to move out. I need to have a fully working kitchen. I will come back when you're done. And then I've had a number of clients who are happy to live through a kitchen, multiple bathrooms, lots of stuff going on. And it's basically glamping with people coming over and visiting every day and doing work on your home. So it really depends on what your tolerance is for it. Another thing that really kind of goes into that is like the time of year and what amenities you may or may not be giving up. So in some homes, it's possible for us to set up amenities somewhere else in the home. It also kind of toe and toe goes into like the extent of the renovation. So if we're doing something like a rear addition, it's still kind of possible, depending on the extent of a rear addition, to stay and live in your home, because we basically build a false wall, build out the extension, and then like close it up to the main house, which we're kind of doing right now. Where it gets a little bit trickier in like larger renovations is where you're either building up and you're doing like a top story addition, or doing like a house lift, in which case, like, how do you access your house? Because the whole foundation aspect is not connected to the ground. Or if you're just like doing like a full reno gut and you're doing it all at the same time, well, then it really becomes like, no, we need you to not be here. I'm so sorry. And try and figure out how best to plan that. Because that's another aspect of it too, is that we don't want people to be in a situation where they're renting a space longer than they have to be, is another aspect. And then there's also the doesn't make sense. Just because it's physically possible to do and to phase the project and break everything out, it doesn't necessarily mean that it makes the most amount of sense. Because you can phase a project, and then in a really simple example, say you've got 3 floors of a home that you need to renovate, you can renovate each of the 3 floors at a different time. that you can continue to live in your home and not have to move out. You have a working toilet the whole time? Will you have a kitchen the whole time? We really on the toilet aspect rather than a bathroom aspect. Because usually if there's like a toilet, it's pretty easy for us to hook up a sink. And again, it comes back to like what your tolerances are, because a lot of people are like, okay, I can sponge bath or I can go to the community center and that's okay. But we find that toilets are really, quality of living sort of situation. And then there's the other aspect of like family safety. So if you're going to be in the home, does it make sense for your family to be there, or does it make more sense to move your family out if you've got young kids or pets that have tendencies to just eat anything that they can get their paws on, or if you've got family members with accessibility concerns, then it might become a big part of the conversation to consider not being in that space while it's being worked in. So again, kind of looking at scopes of work that really disrupt a family's ability to use the space in any capacity. So anything from, a house lift, things where you're doing like a full house fit, where you're opening up like a very large, substantial part of the building envelope. Those are all kinds of things that you really want to consider not being in the home, is where the majority of the home is just not usable. The other thing is if you're going to be looking at extensive periods without access to key amenities, such as, toilets, electricity, water, like if your electricity needs to get shut down for a period of time because you're doing a service upgrade and a big rewiring, and same kind of goes for the water. Like if you're doing a water service upgrade, and you're having to repipe your whole home, and it all kind of has to happen at once, then those are kinds of things that really start to trigger people to be like, okay, we're just gonna move out. The other aspect is also, if you do phase work, and we'll talk this a little bit more, it does like add to the overall length of time of construction. If you do choose to live through a renovation, concerns that you might have would be things like, how will the weather affect the interior of my home? You might be concerned about hazardous material exposure. You might be concerned about just like general construction site safety and creature comforts. And so the answer to all of those things is that your general contractor, they will properly protect the site. So if you're working in a specific room, it'll get, dust protected and walled off properly. So that, if there is any construction site safety concerns or hazmat exposure concerns, that they're in that space, and that any hazmat that does need to be remediated is remediated in the appropriate fashion so that it is a safe space to work in. And then when it comes to, weather and concerns about that, it's really about your site supervisor and your general contractor making sure that all of that is weatherproofed properly and fully tarped off, and whatever that looks like for your individual project. Sometimes it means putting up like scaffolding around the whole house or over the back of the house, which I'm sure most people have seen at some point in the city driving around, where then you have like tarping around that, or just like good old fashioned tarps draped from like the roof over the structure, which again, I'm sure people have seen as well. So it's really about your general contractor addressing your concerns and making sure things being held correctly and executed in the appropriate way. A few key spaces that we look at. So we deal with a lot of kitchens and bathrooms. I wanted to kind of address kitchens and bathrooms specifically in terms of things that people think about in those spaces. So if you choose to live through a kitchen renovation, there are often times where we can set up basically a temporary mini kitchen somewhere in your home. In a lot of homes, it's about just flipping it on, like if there's a wall that separates between the kitchen and a living space where all of the services run in that wall, we'll often just flip them to the other side of that wall temporarily and then patch it when we're done. Sometimes it's a matter of, setting something temporary up in the garage so that you have like, a range, and a place to wash your dishes, and just set up some like, temporary countertop sort of area. So it is again very much a glamping situation. It is something that again, like people will take into consideration what season of the year. People love doing kitchen renovations in the summertime or when the weather's still good, because they're like, well, I can go out and barbecue. If there is like a wall that is shared with a space, especially like a kitchen where you've got a lot of stuff getting mounted on the walls, we often suggest that you clear the other side of that wall as well. So that's another consideration, is that you don't want anything that's breakable piled up or like adhered to that wall. So any picture frames that you have up or any displays, you'll want to take those off for the time of your renovation. And then the other aspect is, how do you manage a kitchen in with a great room space where, it ties into your living and dining areas, and you don't necessarily want to look at redoing that entire space. And so that is really where we'll basically put up a false wall, whether it's like a, framed out with plywood, or whether it's just framed out with poly. It does get some sort of protection to try and maintain, all of the dust and mess in one area. There is usually a certain amount of patching that needs to get managed between the two spaces. Things like paint, sometimes there needs to be like a flooring transition or things like that, trim work that need to be considered between the two spaces to make sure that everything is continuous and finished properly. But those are kind of typically the major things that people are concerned about. And then when looking at bathroom renos, we're typically looking at, is there another bathroom in the house? It definitely makes it a lot easier to live with if there's just like another bathroom that you can use in the interim. Another thing that needs to be thought about is the renovated space being accessed through a bedroom, so specifically like ensuite bathrooms. It's something to consider, because if you're living in your home, you have to consider, okay, well, am I going to commit to being up and ready and out of my space every morning before the guys get here to start working? Or do I want to just basically camp out in another space in my home? Which a lot of people will do, is that they'll choose to stay in like their spare bedroom or something like that through the course of construction. And then they don't have to worry about, the anxiety of making sure that their bedroom is decent when people walk through it, whatnot, with timelines of small spaces. So I often speak with people, and they often think that a bathroom can be done in significantly shorter period of time than, say, a kitchen can be. The reality is that it is shorter, but it's not as much shorter than people think. They think it can be done in like half the time, where it's more of a 3/4 of the amount of time sort of situation. And that's because bathrooms are small spaces and you can't have too many people working in that space. Like the square footage just does not allow for it. Um, so you can't really have like the plumber and the electrician working in there at the same time. You really can't have the tiler in there at the same time as the plumber, or at the same time as the mill worker. Like everybody kind of has to be lined up one after the other. And so it does tend to draw out the schedule a little bit more. So it's just kind of keeping in mind that when you're working in tight spaces, even if it does seem like a small job, if there's like a lot of detail and density to the finishes in that space, it's going to take a certain amount of time just to get everyone through there properly, let everything dry properly and be done and executed in the way that it's supposed to have the best output, the best product. And then kind of tackling the big one of living through phased renos. So for this one, it's kind of thinking about either multiple areas on one floor where you might look at doing, oh, I'll do a kitchen and a bathroom. And then for the second half, I'll do a bathroom and my bedrooms or something like that. Or for some people, it's looking at different rooms in different areas of the home, where they'll sometimes do, a suite in their basement or on a level of their home. And okay, so they're doing a kitchen, a bathroom, some bedrooms, a living space, and then sometimes people will move down into that suite area to then do their main living area afterwards. So those are the kind of things that we think of when we're talking about phased renovations. So the things to really consider there is that at that point you're moving around multiple times. And if you're okay with that, that's totally fine. You have our support. We will work with you to make that happen. Um, so it's really you're packing up, you're moving from one place to another again before construction is really completely over. Especially depending on the number of phases. I've been using like two-phased projects so far, but we've had a number of clients who have, 3 or 4 phases with us where they're taking on the chunks of work that they feel comfortable taking at one time. It does create a longer end-to-end construction timeline, which kind of ties back to a comment that I made earlier in the presentation. Because if you're doing, say, if you're doing a bathroom and then a kitchen and then some bedrooms, and then you're doing, I don't know, the basement in your home, like you're basically calling back the same people to do work 3 or 4 times in a row. So instead of getting all of the work done in one stretch of time, you're basically getting them to come back to back and making the end-to-end construction time longer. But for some families, that's still okay and worth it because then they get to stay in their home. They don't have to move. They don't have to find a rental. Every time that we phase a project, there are like a minor additional cost to restarting construction for every phase. So basically to call everybody back and reset everything up for a new project and all of that. And it's relatively small. Depending on the project, I think it's between 1 and 2% the last time we looked into it. And I think it's sometimes less on bigger projects because it kind of gets diluted a little bit. Those are basically the things that we want to think about when we're thinking about living through a renovation. Why people stay in their homes, whether it can be done, does it make sense for their family to do it? When to move out? So when is that like breaking point to say, nope, I'm not doing this? Concerns that you might have if you do choose to live through the reno, living through kitchen renos, things to consider living through a bathroom reno, and then things to consider when you're living through multiple phases and living through the majority of your home get renovated. Those are kind of the food for thought items that we were going through. Does anybody have any kind of specific questions or comments?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. Okay, hi. It's very nice to have you both here explaining so many various factors of this quite bewildering project, I think, undertaking. I'm planning to do a kitchen renovation, and
Hmm.
I'm hoping to stay there in the house while it's being done. Uh,
Yep.
but only thing is that I want to keep the fridge and the microwave. I would be
Yep.
changing the dishwasher and the cooktop and the oven,
Okay.
but I want to keep the fridge and the microwave for because they seem to work fine for me. So
Yeah.
how would they do it when they're going to, would they move the fridge down to the garage so I could use it? Or
Yeah. So we actually with multiple, like with various different types of renovations, there are often things that clients will ask us to retain and to keep so that they can reinstall them afterwards. So in your case, you're wanting to keep some of your appliances. So we would want to make sure that we have the correct dimensions for them so that we can make sure there's the correct amount of space in your new kitchen for your fridge and your microwave, I think you mentioned.
yes.
And and then yeah, we would store them elsewhere in the home, whether it makes sense to take them all the way down to the garage or or whether we just move it into the living room so that you can continue using it through the course of construction. For example, I'm not sure what your layout is, but if that's something that's appropriate where we just move it into another room and plug it into a wall so that you continue to have a fridge, then that's
Yeah.
something that we would potentially do as well. And same goes for the microwave.
Okay, well, what has happened is the fridge is pretty wide, so
Yep.
it won't go through the doors that are exiting from the garage, from the kitchen to the living room. It
Okay.
will exit into the corridor, and those are very 30 inches or 28 inches wide, I think.
Okay.
The fridge is quite wide, so it would have to be either placed in the corner of the kitchen area, which is by 17 by 10 or something,
Yep.
the kitchen and the little nook area, which we want to redo.
Yep.
So either keep, I don't know if they'd be happy with having it sitting in the corner somewhere, or would they want to take it down from the patio downstairs into the garage?
Yeah, I think it would really depend. It would really depend on just determining it on site ultimately with the site supervisor and what their preference is, because ultimately if we choose to keep it in the kitchen, it's kind of our job to keep it like safe at that
Yes,
point,
that's right.
protect it, wrap it up and all of that. So it would be a matter of determining what the best situation and the best path forward would be. Whether it would be, putting it into that little nook area like you're saying, or whether it would be moving it out onto the patio and just making sure that it's correctly wrapped and weatherproofed so that it doesn't get wet
But I would be
and
using it
damaged.
though. I would be if I'm going to make
Uh,
a kitchen, I need to use it.
yeah. And then yeah, I mean if ultimately the best plan is to move it down to the garage, then that's what we would do.
I guess that's
I
all the
can't
equipment to take it down, huh?
yeah, I mean ultimately if that's the best place, right, and that's what will work best through the course of the renovation, then that's ultimately what we'll do. I know that the team would prefer to avoid having to get it down the stairs and back up the stairs again, but honestly, like at the end of the day, if that's what's best for the project, then that's what our team will execute.
Yes, unless it'll be impossible to eat everything that's in the fridge, in the freezer. It just never gets totally empty. So there'll be
Yeah.
stuff in there unless they want to plug it and leave it in one corner of the garage, one corner of the kitchen while they're working on the rest of it.
Yeah, well, if you choose to move it downstairs, it'll definitely need to get emptied at least during the move,
Mhm.
and then things can get back in. So
Yeah, of
it would be a
course.
matter of, putting everything into grocery bags and then taking it downstairs separately,
You
and
don't know
then
what their
putting
preference would be in that situation, eh? What they would prefer to do.
I think they would well, it would really depend on the situation circumstance. I th I think they would prefer to get it down into the garage because then they don't have to be responsible for like nicks and like things happening through the course of construction.
Right.
This is it upstairs and then also having increased traffic, you going in and out of the workspace through the course of the day if you need like milk from your fridge or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, it could always be a situation where like, if there's a few staple items that you need on a regular basis, it might be a good idea to just get like a mini fridge or something that is upstairs through the course of construction from like, I don't know, like Costco or somewhere that has like a really great return policy.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have access to the things that you like really need through the course of the day. And then, the things that are more like, I'm making dinner now. And then those things are down in your garage and potentially you have your stove plugged in down there as well in a small cook space. Like garages are a place where we have set up temporary kitchens before.
Yeah. The other thing is for a typical kitchen, like say, 10 by 10,
Mhm.
where we do the flooring, the cabinets, the electrical, plumbing, new sink, new appliances, new countertop, new cabinets. How
Yeah.
would something like that take typically?
How long?
Yeah.
Yeah. So typically for kitchens, uh, the standard time frame I say is about 4 months for construction from beginning to end.
Four months?
It's yeah, sometimes it's a little bit less, but typically it's around 4 months. It includes like all of the demo, all of the back framing, moving anything around, any of the services around that need to be moved for like plumbing and electrical, things like that, new insulation. Sometimes we see windows getting swapped out in kitchens, but that's not like a really huge timeline thing. Um, and then it's all, getting all of your finishes in. So like your cabinetry and your flooring, your countertops. Cabinetry has to get like, we have general measurements from the space, but then they come in and they confirm all the measurements before they actually like make all the cabinetry, which can't be done until all of the framing and drywall is done because it's like right down to like the millimeter. And then the same goes for the countertops. The countertops can't be like perfectly measured until the cabinets are in because everything needs to really kind of fit like a glove.
Mhm.
Um, and then after that, it's getting tiling in for your backsplash and your appliances in and all of that sort of stuff. So by the time everything kind of gets, you know, backed one on top of another, we typically see it around, 3.5, 4 months.
So the cabinets are not, when they start the job, the cabinets are not ready at that point at all.
No, not with custom cabinetry. Sometimes some of the standard boxes can be made in advance, but anything that's custom that needs to fit a space exactly,
Mhm.
they will wait to start fabricating until they can come in and finalize their measurements, like again, down to the millimeter because they want it to fit like properly.
Because right now I have a flat panel kitchen, so there's no boxes there. But I think
Mm-hmm.
thing of the past now is 30 years old. And
Mm-hmm.
now it'll have to be boxes now. So I guess I'll be going with whatever size is available. And if there's extra room there, they'll just probably just put little, I don't know, little corridor there, little channel there or something.
Yeah, sometimes they'll do fillers.
Yeah.
If you're going with like all standard size cabinetry, and if you're going with like a custom cabinetry package, then the boxes will be built according to the size that's required.
Mm.
They'll custom build something. And sometimes you can go with like, say you have, for example, say you have like a 10-foot wall, and say a custom cabinet is 2 feet for the sake of easy math. You can then create a custom cabinet at the end that's either 1 foot, or you can create a custom cabinet at the end that's 3 feet, right?
Yeah.
And kind of make it so that you have that perfect 10 feet and you really take advantage of that full space. Again, I'm just using easy math for the sake of this conversation. But if you're looking at wanting to really maximize your space, it might be worth getting one custom piece. Or if it's not so worrisome to you and you have a decent amount of storage that you find already, then just having a panel to cover it up might be okay for you.
Mhm. And then, sorry, Megan. So hopefully that
Yeah.
answers Sheila's questions there. I do have two questions from Hayden. So the first one
Yeah.
being, does TQ, Hayden joined us a little bit later, and does TQ prefer owners to move out if it is almost a whole home renovation? For example, they are thinking of a kitchen, 3 of the 5 bathrooms renovated, and adding a deck or patio, or adding a deck or patio to the deck.
Yeah. So it really depends on what other, like, how much of the home we're really taking over. Like, if you still have like one bathroom that will be fully functional throughout that entire process, if you still have like an easily separated like living space where, potentially you could set up a temporary kitchen either in like a garage space or a living space, so that you have somewhere that you can like do some basic kitchen-esque stuff, have some basic food or whatever have you, a hot plate, or move your range in that space for that period of time. Um, and you have the room and like your bedrooms, and like there's room in the house for you to be in the house. It sounds like for what you're describing, it would potentially be okay. The point where we really start to encourage people to move out of the home is if it's like a really small, cramped home, and there's not going to be a lot of room for anyone to be and coexist within that space. Or if, we're like gutting the majority of the living space, and like if it's just the bedrooms you have access to, it becomes a little bit of a challenge, because then it's literally you walk out of your bedroom and there's construction happening. It's not ideal in the middle of the night if you need to get up and use the bathroom or something like that. So it's I think it's something that I'd want to determine with like a site visit or something like that.
Okay. And then the second question we had is, what percentage of our clients choose to stay in the home? Has there been issues in terms of unexpected delays to the project or any other unforeseeable surprises?
I don't have like exact percentages in terms of like what kind of clients, how many stay in the home versus how many move out. I would say that the majority of our clients who do renovations do choose to stay in their home, because they're not typically renovating their whole home at the same time. If they're renovating their whole home at the same time, or the majority of their home at the same time, I would say the most of those clients choose to move out. If you're choosing to do just like a couple pieces in your home, I say the majority of those clients choose to continue living in the home. There can always be unforeseen circumstances. If you're planning on like adding a patio or a deck and things like that, there might be um concerns with regards to like, how does it connect, and how we're going to connect it into the main building, because it can't really just like stand alone. It does have to connect to the main structure, and making sure that when we disrupt that waterproofing, that it is repaired appropriately and that it gets properly integrated into the structure. And sometimes if we find something like water damage in a situation like that, that can be an unforeseen circumstance. With regards to just like having a client in the home creating unforeseen circumstance, I can't think of any examples of that. Usually our clients are pretty reasonable to work with as we're completing a project with live-in renovations.
I do have
Mhm.
one other question. Is the
Yeah.
timing usually from 8 to 5, or is it like what are the timings that the people are working in the house?
Our guys usually work 7:30 to 3:30. It might vary slightly from company to company, but those are standard trades times.
So they won't be here till late in the evening or something then?
No, no. Working late is only something that happens if it's absolutely necessary, and it's something that typically happens in projects where, like, the one thing that we'll sometimes see it is with like concrete pours. So that's like either in new home construction or major renovations where we're doing an addition at the structure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So that one thing, and they don't work weekends either, huh? I guess.
We strive not to work on the weekends.
Okay. So the time limit you give us, like you look at my project, you say, okay, this is just one small kitchen, 10 by 10. So we could do this in about uh, 2 months, for example. So how do we look at that time estimate? Is this fairly rigid, or is it could be 2.5 months, could be 3 months, even though we are told 2 months?
I mean, sometimes it pushes an extra week or two, but I mean, that's something that's communicated with you through the course of construction with your site supervisor. Things that typically push this construction schedule are either unforeseen circumstances that we cannot control, like if something is on back order and say you've picked out a specific range and it's on back order and you've said, no, this is the range I really want. I'm going to wait for it. Then that's something where like our hands are tied. Or you know, I mean, now we have the perfect example of like, COVID. That's something that like we didn't have control over and things like that. Or if through the course of construction, you come into a bunch of extra cash and you say, you know what, I also want to do my bathroom at the same time. And so something like that would also add to your construction time. So it's usually things like change in scope and unforeseen circumstances that really expand that time schedule based off of whatever our initial estimate on the schedule is. And we do provide you with a construction schedule when we start construction so that you can see how long it's supposed to take week by week and all of that.
So you give us a little plan that says week 1, this is what will be done by week 1. Week 2, we plan to do this.
Yeah, it's actually like right down. Yeah, it's like it's an overlapping like week by week, midweek. Like this is approximately midweek of the fourth or third week you can expect the electricians to show up or whatever that looks like, depending on the project. So we do produce that for you.
Okay. Mhm.
And your site supervisors will do walkthroughs with you as well. So the site super will do regular client meetings with you, either daily or weekly, to walk through the project with you, answer any questions, concerns,
So typically your
curiosities.
projects all finish by the time that you've given the clients time frame?
Give or take, give or take, assuming that nothing like major changes standard, we're typically finishing within our area.
Makeshift kitchen. Do you help in that, or is it totally like when the guys come to work the first day? Should I have everything settled and sorted out, or
Typically, it's something that will help. It's typically something that will budget some time into our schedule and into our budget to, because typically, like there's some things like ranges where you have to plug them into a specific type of plug. So we'll arrange to make sure that that specific type of plug is there and rough in a temporary power source and things like that.
Mhm. So the first thing they would do is remove all the appliances, huh? Like the range and the dishwasher, and check them out, I guess.
It depends on each project. So if we're looking to keep certain things, we'd be keeping those things first. We would tag those before construction. We'd move them, make sure they're safe, and then, move on with the rest of the project.
So the appliances, they don't go for recycling or anything, right? They just get.
We do recycle where it's appropriate to.
Mhm.
It's all a part of our demolition process. The things that need to be recycled get recycled. The things that need to be properly remediated for asbestos or anything else, those get appropriately dealt with and taken away. If you're doing any kind of like chimney removal, we get a rock bin so that those don't just go to the landfill, they go to their own yard. So everything gets dealt with appropriately.
I think that's coming up to the time that we do have today. Thank you so much for all these questions. And if there are further questions, please feel free to email us. You can email us at info@tqconstruction.ca, and we will follow up with Megan answering those questions directly to you. And a little note here, we do have our next webinar scheduled for next month on November 20th. It's a Wednesday evening again at 6:30 p.m. So feel free to look out for registration for that webinar, and we look forward to seeing you there. Additionally, we do have, not this weekend, but the next weekend, we are going to be exhibiting at the Vancouver Fall Home Show, which we are offering 20-minute free design consultations. So feel free to also sign up, and you can also further speak with our project consultants like Megan and Henry, our president, and our designers, Leslie and Rebecca. So yes, feel free to look at our website for any upcoming events that you would like to attend, like this webinar and our home show. And yes, any last parting words, Megan, that you would like to say?
No, thank you so much for coming, guys. And we hope to see you in future webinars. Thank you so much for the questions as well and the responses. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.